Hello everyone out there in the cyberland. uxwbill's mother here, and today we are going to make biscuits from scratch. You know those tube biscuits that you buy in the grocery store? Well, I know they're easy to fix, but if you look at the ingredient label, they've got a lot of things in them that really aren't too healthy, and it's really easy to make biscuits. So today, on this wonderful St. Patrick's Day, we are going to make biscuits from scratch. We're going to color them green for St. Patrick's Day, so follow along and I will show you just how easy it is to make the most wonderful, tender biscuits that you have ever had. We're going to start with 4 cups of flour. This should make about a dozen biscuits. So I have my 1 cup measure here. So we'll start with 4 cups of flour. One. This is just regular white flour. It's not self-rising flour. You could use bleached or unbleached flour. 2. Gonna have to get to the store and get some more flour. And it is important, I'll give you a household tip here, always store your flour in an airtight container. If you can't, keep it in the refrigerator or the freezer, because you don't want to get any kind of mealy bugs or bran bugs in your flour, and it can happen really easily. So this is a Tupperware container, and it's airtight. Okay. Alright, so that's our flour, and we'll seal our lid so we don't have to worry about bugs in the flour. Okay, next ingredient is 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And it doesn't matter what brand you use, but you do want to make sure that you check the expiration date. And this is good until February of 20, because if your baking powder is out of date, it will not work well. Now, what's unique about this baking powder is, if you're health conscious, this is aluminum free. Okay, we need 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And the way that the lid has been folded back like this, I can use that as a leveler to level my spoon. Alright. So I just scrape it across like that. There's 1. Two tablespoons of baking powder. Alright. This is Argo brand, a brand that's been around a long, long time. Next, I need 2 tablespoons of sugar. I don't know how it would work if you substituted honey or any other type of sweetener. And again, I keep the sugar in a Ziploc bag to keep anything from bothering the integrity of the sugar. So 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and then I can seal my bag and put the lid on the canister. Okay. Now, before I go any further, I think it's important to incorporate these ingredients, because once you get your liquids in here, you're not going to be handling this dough a lot. So you want to make sure that the sugar and the baking powder are well incorporated in the flour. Okay. I have a good-sized bowl here as well. Okay. If you are using salted butter, you do not have to add any salt at this time, but if you're using unsalted butter, you could put in 1 teaspoon of salt. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grate some butter, and I'm using real butter here. I need 12 tablespoons of real butter. So there's 6 tablespoons in a stick, or I'm sorry, there's 8 tablespoons in a stick, and I need 12, so I need a stick and a half of butter. Alright, so I've got my dry ingredients pretty well incorporated here. I need 12 tablespoons of butter. And the best way to integrate the butter into this dry mixture is to grate it. So, I would recommend that you put your butter in the freezer so it's good and hard, and then come along with just a box grater and as quickly as you can, because you don't want the butter to get warm from your hands, but as quickly as you can, grate that butter. Be very careful when you get down to the last little bit. There you go. Alright, so now I'll get the rest of it. And the more frozen the butter, the better. So if your butter is rock hard, it will grate really well. Okay. So. Doesn't take any time at all to grate 12 tablespoons of butter. And this really works better than trying to cut it up into little bits and work it in with a pastry blender. This just works a whole lot better. Okay, get the wrapper off. And the secret is, if it's frozen, it's not going to get real gummy on the grater. So this could have really been a little more frozen. Okay. So, when you mix this in, you don't really want to handle it a lot. And you will see little buttery bits in the dough. Okay, I probably shouldn't worry about the last little crumbs. Alright, so you can see what this looks like now. And I can try to incorporate it by just stirring it around a little bit. And I'm going to need a cup and a half of milk. And that's the liquid that will make this into a dough. And the secret is not handling it a lot. So, you could use any kind of milk, and when I say that I mean whole skim 1% or 2%. I don't know how this would work if you used an almond milk or a milk substitute. So a cup and a half of milk. I am using 1% low-fat milk, and of course the milk is going to really determine the fat and the calories of your biscuit. So all I'm going to do is loosely try to incorporate this as best I can until it starts to form kind of a sticky dough. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it out on a floured cutting board and knead it just a little. I'm going to knead it just a very little bit to just get it a little more dough-like. Okay, so right now it's just kind of crumbly and not sticking together real well, but that's what you want, so that's good. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little flour on a cutting board. I'm going to smooth it around with my hands. Now, anytime I'm doing any kind of handling, I always take all my jewelry off. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to get this out on the cutting board and knead it a little bit by hand to incorporate it into more of a dough. Okay. And I might have to put a little flour on the top of it. Okay, so it's going to be a little sticky, and but I want it to be a little sticky. Now, this particular recipe does not call for using a rolling pin. It says to simply pat the dough out with your hands. And if you don't have a biscuit cutter, you can use a glass. And we'll be using a glass because I don't happen to have a biscuit cutter. So it does seem a little crumbly, but this is what you want. And you can see that it has really worked up the flour on the board, and it's just really becoming more of a dough-like consistency, less sticky. I'm not too worried about the little bit that's stuck on my hands. Okay. All right, yeah, this is working up really well into a nice dough and really not sticky anymore. Okay. And it changes in consistency too. It really just feels like dough. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do, and I'm thinking this is going to be easier to pat flat if I cut it in half. Okay, so I'll just put this part back in the bowl. So, the recipe specifically said don't use a rolling pin. Just use your hand. And if it's starting to stick a little bit to your board, you can put a little flour down. Then it won't stick when you pat it out. So you're going to pat it out to about a ½ inch thickness. I guess I should have started the timer to see just how long it takes to make biscuits from scratch. But I'll bet this whole thing doesn't take 10 minutes from start to finish. Okay, so in preparation for baking our biscuits, we're going to take some parchment paper, and we're going to put some parchment paper on a cookie sheet. And that way we know that they won't stick, and so we can do that. Now it's a little curly, so I'll just hold it down with a measuring cup until I'm ready to put my biscuits there. Now, today is St. Patrick's Day. I wanted to make green biscuits and I forgot to mix the green in. So I've got a little bit of green food coloring here, and I'm just going to liberally sprinkle it on my dough, and I guess I'm going to have to knead it around a little bit until it starts to turn green. There we go, green biscuits. Starting to turn, my hand's starting to turn green too. Okay, yes, we have to have green biscuits on St. Patrick's Day. So they're going to look a little funky, but they will be green. Okay, so I really don't want to handle this too much. But I want green biscuits. Alright, so it's a little marbly looking, but I know the thought was there. Okay, and again, I don't want it to stick.
Now, could you perhaps use like spinach instead of food coloring in those?
Oh, probably. Okay. I should have thought if I would have put the food coloring in the milk, then they would have been more of a solid green. Anyway, as it is, they're a little mottled, but they're sort of green. Green biscuits. Yes.
This is one of those very therapeutic food items. It's like the meatloaf.
Oh, we're not supposed to handle it a lot. Okay, here we go. Now, I'm going to get a pancake turner. Okay, biscuit number 1. I'm not going to measure it, but it looks to be about a ½ inch thick. Okay, place that on the parchment.
By the way, the whole time that we're doing this, you probably want to be preheating your oven to approximately 425 degrees.
Right. Okay, they were kind of green. I'm sure they will be very interesting when they rise. Now, the last time we made biscuits, they rose delightfully. They do look a little weird. They're green. Green biscuits. All right. So, we will just continue this process of flattening the dough, keeping this non-sticky. So you're basically making your biscuits with flour, baking powder, sugar, optional salt, butter, and milk. Simple ingredients that everybody probably has in their home. And again, I used 1% milk. You could use skim milk, whole milk. I don't think it would make a whole lot of difference. Alright, so we've got our 12 biscuits right down here. They're ready to go in the oven. A little mottled green there. And this is the tailing. This is the last remnant. And rather than trying to roll this into a misshapen biscuit, we're going to bake this as just a tail kind of a thing. And that's kind of fun to eat. So somebody will get the biscuit tail. So if you ever hear the expression, the biscuit tail, well, that's the remnant after all the biscuits have been rolled out and there's just a little bit left. So now we're going to bake them for about 12 minutes. We're going to keep an eye on them. They should puff up and get a golden green.
But you do have to be very careful not to burn them.
Yes, so we'll be watching them. Okay, let's make some room for the tail. Make a little room for the biscuit tail. There we go. All right. We'll see you in about 12 minutes. All right. My hands are no longer green. And cleanup is a breeze if you put a towel on your table first. So all the crumbs, the flour, everything, I can just shake that in the sink. And now we're ready to make some sausage gravy to go with our biscuits. All right, if you like biscuits and gravy, make yours at home. It's so much healthier. So what we've got here, so easy to make. This is ground pork sausage country style from the grocery store. Any grocery store is going to have ground pork. So we've got about 1.5 pounds of ground pork, and I'm going to prepare this in a cast iron skillet. You can't go wrong with cast iron. So I'll put that in there. Okay, food safety handling. This is raw pork, so you do want to make sure that any surface that it touches, you wash your hands, and you want to make sure that this is cooked thoroughly before you eat it. So we'll get this in the skillet and we'll brown it. So this is the first step to making the best sausage gravy that you have ever had. Step number 1, in a skillet, brown some ground pork sausage. If you don't like it seasoned, just get plain pork sausage. This was called country style. It's going to have a little seasoning in it. I'm going to break it up and I'm going to brown it in a skillet. Once it's brown, I'll show you how to make the best sausage gravy that you have ever had. Okay, let's talk about this gravy. The pork is nicely broken up into small pieces. You want that. And this is very lean pork. So you can see there is like little or no grease in this skillet. If your pork is greasy, take the time right now to drain it. I'm not going to drain this because there's really nothing here to drain. Okay, so where does the gravy happen? The pork is nicely browned, nicely broken up, so it's fully cooked. I don't see any pink here at all. Alright, so the gravy is a personal thing. Do you like it thick? Do you like it runny? Got some flour over here. How much? Well, I suppose there's a half a cup of flour here. I'm not going to put this all in. I'm going to start with about this much flour, and I'm going to literally sprinkle it over the pork. Probably enough just to cover it, like that. And I'm going to work it in. But there's no gravy yet. Because this was lightly seasoned, I'm not going to put any salt or pepper on it. How much milk am I going to put in? I'm going to start with about a half a cup. So here comes the personal choice. The flour and the milk is going to make a gravy. And depending on how much gravy you want or how thick you want it to be, I'm going to add a little more flour. I want a little more gravy. So now it's just add a little flour, add a little milk. Stir it together until it's the consistency that you want. Okay? Add a little flour, add a little milk. And the more that this heats, and it's turned down to low now, but it's going to simmer, it will thicken. The flour and the milk will thicken. You can kind of see it's thickening a little bit already. Okay, so if you put this on a biscuit, would you want a little more gravy? Well, maybe I would. So I'll put a little more flour on it. So I still haven't used all of that half a cup of flour. And I'll put a little more milk in it until it's the consistency that I want. And now for the big reveal. Golden brown biscuits. And let's take a look. Let's pick one up and see if they're burned on the bottom. Nope. Golden green through and through. We got a nice rise, and welcome to breakfast.
This is going to be pretty awesome.
Alrighty. Good. Really good.
So, are you ready for biscuits and gravy?
I'm always ready for biscuits and gravy.